Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity Show, and I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business sphere. Before I introduce you to today's guest, we have a message from our podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is dedicated to providing financial clarity and profit maximizing solutions to small businesses. The team at Clara CFO is comprised of seasoned accounting professionals with a heart for small business. We help growth-minded entrepreneurs thrive through fractional CFO services and financial education. Whether you're grappling with hiring decisions, profit margin concerns, or you just have ambitious growth plans, Clara CFO Group provides insights, recommendations, and a clear financial roadmap to help you achieve your goals. Clara CFO is not just about one-time solutions. We're passionate about forging long-term relationships to ensure your financial success as your business grows. And to learn more about Clara CFO Group and how we can help your business, visit claracfo.com. So we are going to introduce our guest, Jeff Grant. He is here with us. But before I read you his amazing bio, I want to thank Scott Case from Upside Financial for actually introducing us to, which has been so great. Jeff and I actually connected over 2.5 years ago during the pandemic because we were talking about COVID relief funds, and you will find out why in just a minute. But we already actually have an interview with Jeff on our other YouTube channel. And so you can go and check that out. It has over 80,000 views, and it has been really insightful for a lot of people. So definitely check that out if you find this interview interesting. So today's guest is Jeff Grant, and I'm going to go ahead and read his bio because it is a doozy and it's good. It's a juicy one. After an addiction to prescription opioids, serving almost 14 months in federal prison for white-collar crime he committed in 2001, Jeff started his own reentry, earning a Master's of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary, majoring in social ethics. After graduating from Divinity School, Jeff was called to serve at an inner-city church in Bridgeport, Connecticut as an associate minister and director of prison ministries. Then he co-founded Progressive Prison Ministries, the world's first ministry dedicated to serving people navigating the white-collar criminal justice system. On May 5th, 2021, Jeff's law license was reinstated by the Supreme Court of the state of New York. And on August 10th, 2022, he celebrated 20 years of continuous sobriety. Jeff has founded his law firm, Grant Law, and is once again in private practice in New York City and is committed to using his legal expertise and life experience to benefit others. On top of all of that, he is also featured in lots of amazing articles in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Business Insider, Reuters, The New Yorker, Bloomberg Law, and many others. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks, Hannah. It's so wonderful to be back with you. I can't believe it's been 2.5 years since we did the podcast.
I actually had to go and check. I was like, no way. Has it really been that long? But yes, it was early 2021 when we first talked. So it's been a while.
That was really a very important podcast for me because as many times as I told my story over the last 10 or 15 years, nobody was interested in disaster loans or SBA loans. It became an important topic again during the pandemic. And yours was one of the first podcasts I gave that was very specific about SBA loan fraud and how to avoid having a problem and then what you would do if you had a problem. And of course, from your perspective, you provide so much value to people in those situations that it was a heartfelt conversation, but also technical. And I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely people can go and check that one out. We had a great conversation about SBA loan fraud and how to try to prevent you from getting to that place. But I think let's take it back to your story and why we're even talking about that. For the people who don't know, take us back to 2000, 2001. What was happening? You were practicing law in New York City, and you made some decisions. You want to bring us there?
I will definitely bring you there. Well, from in 2001, I moved my law firm from New York City up to no, in 1991, I moved my law firm from New York City up to Westchester,
Mm.
and had a sports injury and got addicted to prescription opioids, which kind of marks the big change of what happened in my life.
Mm.
Because from there, it was about 10 years of opioid addiction and making bad decisions and things kind of getting worse, even as the law firm at the time was getting more successful, and in spite of of my drug use. Of course, until the day it wasn't becoming more successful anymore, and then it was kind of a slide down in late 90s. I couldn't keep it together anymore, and in order to make payroll, I invaded the client escrow account and used client money to make payroll and to pay some other expenses. And of course, that was the proverbial deal with the devil.
Mm.
No way out of that once I started doing it. And there was an investigation not soon thereafter. I tried to defend myself, hired good lawyers for that. And then 9/11 came along. And that really threw me for a loop completely. A few months later, they were advertising for SBA disaster loans, much like they did in the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And the criteria to qualify was very low. I was in a county that was directly abutted New York City, so I would have qualified for the loan.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when I filled out the actual application, I was just so desperate that I lied and said I had a law office a couple of blocks away from Ground Zero.
Mm-hmm.
I got the loan. It was $247,000, and but the loan didn't do anything to save the business, which was already ill-fated, and I wound up misusing the funds anyway. I mean, they weren't for a sordid reason, but they weren't for operation. For business operations. I actually repaid my credit cards with the loan funds or part of the loan funds. And in July of 2002, it all came kind of crashing down. And I tried to kill myself with a overdose of the opioids. Woke up a couple of days later and went to rehab and started chapter 2.
Mm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a lot. And I think part of this is like sharing your story really vulnerably so that people can learn from it. So we really appreciate that. When you got the SBA loan, it was really, so you were basically just trying to like cover the past sins of the financial trouble that you were in. Basically, you were just looking for some of that cash to cover that.
Yeah, I think that it was hard for me to tell at that point why the business was failing. Was it because of my opioid use? Was it because of 9/11? Was it a mix of things? It's not. It wasn't like I had the right metrics in place to be able to figure that out. Things were just nosediving, and what I found since in representing and helping a lot of people who are in those situations is that people are kind of always, or entrepreneurs, they're always kind of optimistic that they think that next year is going to be better than the current year. So they're always kind of borrowing against projected earnings or projected revenue. But then when the bottom falls out and the revenue is not there, sometimes you just can't make up for it.
Yes. Yeah. And we're seeing that a lot. I think I see that even with some clients where we thought like the worst was over. So I think even some decisions being made or like, having big goals or big hopes for the next year, we're always kind of grappling that, still be conservative, knowing that we don't actually know what the future will hold. We can hope and plan for it to be good. But when you're borrowing on that money that you think is coming in, that can get you in some real sticky situations. So,
Exactly.
and I think a lot of people did that with these EIDL loans in 2020, 2021. They were taking out way bigger loans than they probably needed to, thinking that the business would come back to maybe pre-COVID levels. And we're seeing a lot of businesses have a really slow rebuilding process. So it's pretty interesting overall. But when all of that happened, it was a number of years before was it did the SBA come knocking, or was it the FBI?
Well, what happened was I got sober in August of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? 2022. 2020. 2002, I got
Yes.
sober.
I was like, it's been 20 years.
In 2002, I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
And about 20 months into sobriety, I got a phone call from two federal agents who told me that there was a warrant out for my arrest in connection with the false representations I had made on the SBA loan. They gave me a couple of weeks to get a lawyer and then turn myself into the marshals down at the federal courthouse in Manhattan. And so that was kind of that snapped me out of denial real fast.
Mm-hmm.
And the legal process then began. It went from being kind of a drug and alcohol recovery process to very much being about getting through the legal process. And then 2 years after that, reporting to prison.
Gotcha. What would you say to people who maybe are in a situation that they might be hearing that they got federal funds maybe during EIDL time, but maybe they're realizing they could have done a very similar thing. Like maybe they were using it to pay off personal loans or doing lots of things with EIDL money. It was supposed to be for very specific things. And if they know at this point that they maybe didn't do that, what thoughts do you have for them?
Well, I wish it were a hypothetical question, but we know that there's probably about $200 billion worth of loan money out there that's suspect.
Mm-hmm.
This is by far the largest white-collar prosecution or group of prosecutions that this country has ever engaged in. Will it pass over anyone in particular and not hit them? Don't know. But what I would do is I would get my ducks in order preemptively, do everything I could possibly do. Books, records, put a file together, hire a lawyer, hire competent financial people, put it all together. And even if it turns out to be kind of a rainy day fund, stuff that you never have to use, you might have to use it. And knowing your exact position, I think, is a really healthy way to operate. From my perspective, with people who come to me, there's all kinds of collateral issues generally that they're talking to me about. And sometimes it's bankruptcy issues, or divorce issues, partnership issues in terms of, because successful people don't necessarily only have one business. They can have multiple businesses, and there's cross ownership, and there's all kinds of things going on. And how can you say, for example, sacrifice one business and save another because they may not have common ownership? So there's all kinds of decisions in there, and it's really a case-by-case basis. But if I were going to make just the sweeping answer to your question is, it's a Boy Scout motto: be prepared.
Yeah. And we were trying to preach that all along, and also like keep good records along the way of like what you spend the ideal money on. But, I think it became pretty low priority, I think, for a lot of people, and thinking like once they got the money, it was kind of like, well, now I'm just going to use it, and I'm going to use it doing whatever I want with it. So yes. What would you say is like kind of being on the other side of that process. And what do you think that like the public just doesn't know about, you know, the I guess the ability to even like look into your financial situation that that the federal government has some way to even find out this stuff. Like I would never even think that, I mean, you would just think, oh, I put in an application and then it kind of like nobody's ever looking at it or anything. I guess what surprised you in the process of your full investigation?
What surprised me is that it shouldn't have surprised me. That's the first piece. Because intuitively, it really made sense because when you take out a disaster loan, well, some disaster loans, EIDL loan, for example, they take all available collateral, and all available collateral could be a personal guarantee from a co-guarantor. Like generally, they will have a spouse guarantee a loan on behalf of another spouse. If you have equity in your home, they're going to take that collateral potentially. Mm-hmm. And so let's say business has gotten to the point where it's collapsed, despite the fact that you were able to get disaster loan money, and then you have to sell your house. Well, there may not be sufficient equity to pay off the loan, the SBA loan in full, whatever type of loan it was. And so you need to get a release from them and a partial payment, but that doesn't mean you don't owe the rest of the money. It just means that it becomes uncollateralized. As soon as that loan becomes uncollateralized, you are in investigation. They will review every line of that application to find out whether or not you've somehow misled them. That could take years for them to get back to you. Since Congress has expanded the statute of limitations for these prosecutions to 10 years now.
Oh, I was going to ask you if you knew what the statute was.
So you could be kind of going on your merry way 6 years later, and then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door and life has changed. Mm-hmm. And it really shouldn't be a surprise when you put your own pieces together as to what happened. Mm-hmm. Especially if that you think you're making decisions that are going to distance yourself from the problem, but if you're in small business, there's always looming things. Like, for example, you've put in for another loan application. So then all of those loan applications become subject. Or to go back to your original question, the way that they find you could be not necessarily something you've done, but let's say that you were in through a fintech loan originator, and they got nabbed by the prosecution, and so now they're doing a random check of every application done by that lender.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so you could get swept up into someone else's investigation very, very easily. The last thing I want to say is that any loan above a certain amount, I don't remember what the threshold is, but it's not low. It's not low. It's not high. It could be as low as $25,000, maybe. I don't recall right now. They're published.
Yes.
And so if there's anyone out there who doesn't like you or somehow feels like you haven't treated them well, especially in the decline of your business or while your business is teetering, they could become a whistleblower very, very easily. Mm-hmm. And you might not know it for years.
Yeah. I mean, a disgruntled employee, somebody who thought that they should have, not been let go, somebody who, even like a ex-spouse or, there could be a lot of different things, or just a a family member that happened to get wind of it, that they don't like you anymore for some reason. I mean, I think there is a lot of public information about these loans because it is, federal money that came out. So there is that level of accountability.
Yeah.
And I think the disaster loans, probably when you got them, had some different rules with EIDL. I think the EIDL was a little bit more lax on like the collateral levels. I know like you didn't have to put up your house until it was like a certain level. And I forget what the threshold is now because I haven't had to talk about EIDL loans in quite a long time. But at least like getting them. Now we're talking about repaying them. But yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people signed the paperwork and didn't read the fine print and didn't really understand what they were signing. So it's good to go back and read those loan documents. Even if you have them and you're concerned about it, you can go and check that out. So anything else on that side? Because I kind of want to talk about your new venture. I don't want to talk about the past too much.
Yeah, and this, in a way, this is kind of a bridge between things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just want to say that on a human level, because I've now spent part of the last 20 years as a reverend and now as a lawyer again. On a human level, I don't really blame people, for anything that happened. I mean, even if it's considered fraud or it's considered misrepresentation, and that's not to take away any of my personal responsibility for what I did. Mm-hmm. But the messages we were being told is that this is an end of the world scenario. So, when it's the end of the world, you do what you need to do to survive. And I'm the last person in the world who can be judgmental about anything. I just want to, provide valuable information, valuable services to people so that they can make the best of whatever their situation is. And unfortunately, sometimes the best also includes things like prison or heavy financial penalties, or sometimes on the personal side, estrangement, divorces, things like that. So it's a human tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's needs to be a lot of empathy, knowing what somebody was doing at the time that they make difficult decisions like that, or they make things like, it's not just that most people wake up in the morning and they're like, I'm going to commit fraud today. Most of the time, that's not how it works. That's not, your story. That's not most people's story. When it comes to that, it becomes, a series of unfortunate events to some degree that gets us there. I mean, every now and then you have somebody who's very, very intentionally just defrauding, but that's not usually the case. You have a support group as well that for people who are either experiencing something like this, or even also for people who are adjacent to. Is that correct? Could you tell us about your support group?
Yeah, well, we have a white collar support group. That's what it's called, the white collar support group. And it meets on Monday nights on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing it for about 7.5 years. Mm-hmm. So we have 368 meetings so far, which is really a miracle of the need and of technology. When we started off in 2016, we certainly had an adoption problem. People weren't that comfortable being online. And they certainly didn't know if they could share the intimacies of their lives and get help and support online. The pandemic cured most of the adoption problems. Mm. But the group is it's dedicated to bringing people out of isolation and into community, because it's isolation that's really the killer. And people are they're isolated because they're full of shame or guilt or remorse, but also their lawyers are telling them not to talk to anybody. And so living with that is very, it's more than difficult. It could be, it could be literally a life and death situation for some people. So we offer them an opportunity to to share, much like an AA meeting is. It's kind of that format. We also have peer support groups, and we have a 24/7 Slack online group with all kinds of information, career opportunities, articles. The chat kind of goes all day and all night. There's hundreds of people in the white collar Slack group that's lightly moderated, just to make sure nothing in there is going to be a problem for anyone who enters things that they shouldn't. We also are doing advocacy now. We're doing co-partnering and collaborations with other nonprofits concerning issues that are important to this constituency. I'm just off the top of my head, the Clean Slate Act, trying to get people's records expunged or sealed. SBA loans, frankly, for people with criminal backgrounds. Pardon reform is a huge one, especially federal pardon reform, because people who've gone through the federal system know that the only way you can get a pardon is by a presidential action, and so there is not many of those. So, in many ways, it's no matter what your sentence is, whether you're given probation or a relatively light custodial sentence or a lengthy one, it turns out to be a life sentence no matter what. And so we're looking to help that be a more humane process. And at the same time, we're counseling people to make amends and to clear up the wreckage of their past. There's not a lot of empathy and compassion for people who either commit or have been accused of committed white-collar crimes. And that kind of changes when people take ownership over the situation and they admit what their mistakes have been, and then they do their best to make restitution. People understand, but it's not an easy message to get across.
Yeah. And I think that was like part of your story too. Like you knew that like prison time was part of your restitution, and like you knew what had happened and you did that. And that's part of like, even like your healing journey. So I appreciate that. I'm sure it's super helpful to have other people. When you don't have anybody around you that's ever experienced what you're going through, so lonely in any aspect of life. So having something like this is truly very helpful, I'm sure. So do people show up anonymously in that group? Is that how it works? Do they have like, pseudonyms or something that they use?
Generally not, but sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll only have their phone number. Not everybody's willing to come on camera.
Right.
That tends to change over time, as people become more comfortable.
Yeah.
But of the 700 plus people who've actually joined the support group meetings, there's a greater number of people who've reached out for help, but for some reason or other, they haven't come on to the support group meeting, but they're still somehow involved in the ministry or involved somewhere in our ecosystem. And I understand it's not, airing your issues is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that. But there's a lot of one-on-one and there's a lot of resource sharing. And I would say that the smallest part of what we do is the actual hour and 15 meetings on a Monday night. The community and the way to change the balance of power within the white-collar criminal justice system or any system is through information. We share our stories. We share our stories not about kind of what we did, but also our stories about being represented by lawyers or having other professionals, what we've gone through in court. Just the sharing of this information is helpful certainly on a psychological level, but it also is kind of an equalizer. I mean, when you know what people before you have been through and say your experience doesn't reflect that, you know how to ask for the things that you might be entitled to or that your rights are. And not everybody's lawyer is the same caliber or quality or has the same amount of experience. And that's unfortunate. But in many ways, in this world, you get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that there aren't brilliant pro bono lawyers and federal defenders, because in some ways they're better than paid lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
But what a gift to have all that information and to be able to consolidate it in a way where it's available to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Those communities, when you get that much additional feedback working together, it can be incredibly valuable. So, okay, I think that I'd love to hear a little bit about your new law firm. And Grant Law has been started, and congratulations for having your license reinstated. That is fantastic. I saw that on social media because we've been following each other since we met, 2.5 years ago. And first of all, congratulations for that.
And it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. It's a really huge deal. Did you ever think that was going to happen?
It was not my plan.
Okay.
Because I could have reapplied for my law license in 2009.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it took me 16 years from when I lost my law license to reapply, and then 3 years after that, basically, for to go through the process, I was doing a lot of other things that were very meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that I wanted to get my law license back was really as an extension of the work I was doing, because I was clearly being helpful to and being helped by people in this in this community. But what they really needed was a lawyer to trust,
Mm-hmm.
not just and because I saw the hole in the market.
Yeah.
So this kind of feeds right into your new podcast project, because I recognize that I'm this is a startup in a way. This is like a whole new idea of performing legal services that surround the criminal justice process. So I'm not a criminal lawyer, although I have a lot of experience, obviously, in the criminal justice system and working with criminal lawyers. But I'm in charge as general counsel for people. I'm in charge of putting together resources, marshaling those resources, and then having them work together in a plan that provides the best long-term solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So, the worst possible thing that can happen is someone look back 10 years later and say, if I only had known now what I knew then, I would have made a lot of different decisions. And the fact that we have those resources now, and I certainly have those resources and that experience from a legal perspective, a ministerial perspective, a recovery perspective, a prisoner reentry perspective, and specifically white collar, to bring it all to bear so that we can make good decisions right now. Mm-hmm. One example is, this is not speaking ill of the criminal defense bar, but generally, criminal defense lawyers are gauged by one specific outcome, and that is how much time their clients will serve in prison. Mm. So if they get less time, that's the measurement, and that's not the only thing that's going on. There's a lot of other things going on. And we've kind of just in this conversation, we've talked about things like bankruptcies and partnership issues and divorce issues and family law issues. But in the CARES Act, First Step Act world that we've been through in the pandemic, people are not serving their entire sentences any longer. they're serving far less generally than they are sentenced to. So what the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. In exchange for that, what's happened is that the government has stepped up its restitution and forfeiture enforcement practice to the point where it can be crushing for people financially.
Mm.
So an example is pre-pandemic, lawyers were telling their clients, their defendant clients, well, don't really worry about restitution or forfeiture because they're never going to come after you anyway. And so people were not giving it a lot of thought. I want to serve less prison time. I'm not going to worry about these financial issues that if the government's not going to come after me anyway. But now the paradigm has shifted where they're serving less time in prison just because of these policies and programs, but these millions of dollars potentially that they've committed to in restitution and forfeiture that they might have been able to fight, or that there's a lot of different rules and laws about that. They're now saddled with these debts that last them their entire life. And because their earning potential is probably much lower. And
Right. Yeah.
the government is not negotiating. This is what you owe.
Yeah.
So having lawyers who understand that as early in the process as possible, even if it's not just your criminal defense lawyer, where it's also your team that you put together, can save a lot of heartache and best guarantee a successful, meaningful life that is less debt burdened when they get out.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I never would have thought about that. And that's, why you need experts on your team and why you need somebody who understands the system really well. That makes a lot of sense. So with your practice now, where are you taking it? Like, where are you going to be solo? Are you going to grow a team again? What's your plan?
Of course, because like everybody, my first instinct was I have a special skill, I have special expertise. Mm-hmm. Let's scale this up and do and so I put together a business plan, a little bit of a team, and then I remembered where I was 25 years ago, mm-hmm. and I had put together a team of people at a law firm, and I was also general counsel to some very successful family-owned real estate companies that are name brands, frankly, or at least in the New York metro area, they're name brands. And the overhead was crushing.
Right.
And part of the stress of that, no doubt, led to part of my opioid addiction. Mm. And I just stepped back and I thought, I don't need to do that again. That's something that aspiring people do. And I don't mean this as I'm not being judgmental. I mean, I'm all pro business. But at some point, in the process of thinking it through, I realized I've arrived. I have what people need, and I also have what I need in order to fulfill my mission and to be of value to people. And I don't need to surround myself with anything or anybody to be bigger or. And so I decided that what I would do is divide my time two ways. One is have a very exclusive law practice. Mm-hmm. That mirrors what I was doing in the past, in that I'm providing, general counsel services to successful and sometimes formerly successful people who are in crisis or who have complicated business issues. But when you're general counsel to these people, you're involved in their personal lives as much as your business life. You know that,
Right.
right? And so, I mean, I can be their general counsel, and I have teams of lawyers that are responsible to me, landlord tenant lawyers and tax certiorari lawyers, and I'm the paymaster. I'm the go-to person inside the company. But then when the CEO's son gets pulled over in the middle of the night, for driving 125 miles an hour, I get that phone call too. I remember my ex-wife saying to me, you got to go, don't you? I said, yeah, I got to go.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And believe me, someone like me just walking into a police station in the middle of the night because I couldn't get a criminal lawyer on the phone, and we always got him out. It's once a lawyer shows up and you know what to say, you basically get them out. So there's that, and I'm really doing what I'm using the gifts that really God gave me, to be well versed kind of in what all of the issues that people are having. But there's a specific hole in the market for all these services around people who are getting prosecuted for white collar and similar crimes, because it also could be regulatory, it could be SEC actions. It could be a lot of things that are similar to that. And it's not like people don't know about this hole. Mm-hmm. They've just, one, they don't have the kind of background I have. Even in the large firms, they don't have it. And two, they don't see where it would be profitable for them as a firm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Basically someone comes in and they have this huge criminal problem. And by the way, I'm not talking about the corporate end of it, because the corporate end of all of this is a very different business. It's a very different process. I'm talking about with people, basically, or small businesses. Mm-hmm. And so someone comes in, and essentially what the criminal lawyer is going to say to them is, this is your problem. It's huge. It's like a Magritte painting, the apples in front of their face. This is everything. This is the problem. And they've set up their legal fees basically to pay for the criminal problem. And there's not enough left over for that law firm to be interested really in providing all these ancillary services. But people still have questions. I mean, so for example, they go to their criminal lawyer and they say, well, I'm thinking about going bankrupt and can I talk to you about that? And the criminal lawyer just kind of looks at him and says, I don't really know anything about that. Mm-hmm. Well, but isn't that like things that you have to weigh right there? I mean, isn't that decision like what does that mean? When do I do it? What's the strategy around it? Mm-hmm. Because there's no doubt there's going to be a lot of business issues and debt and everything, and the criminal lawyers and their law firms just don't want to deal with it for the most part. Yeah. And so that's where I saw the hole in the market. And so as I go to white collar conferences, for example, the American Bar Association White Collar Conference or the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers Conference, where I'm a member of these organizations, and I've spoken at some of them. Mm-hmm. And the criminal lawyers are intrigued. They want to talk. Yeah. Like, oh my God, like there's somebody actually providing the services that we can't do or don't know how to do, or we've been begging our management committee to allocate these resources, mm-hmm. but they won't do it. And also I have street cred.
Yeah, you do. Well, and I mean, I think that's a good kind of business lesson right there. You don't have to be all the things. Like, you can be the specialist, and you've identified that it's a need that also other law firms are interested in. And because they can't go out and hire like they're not going to be able to do that. And they might not even be able to keep you busy enough to like have you on like full time. But I think this could be really applicable to any industry. If you're a service provider, what do you do really, really well? And can you tag along in finding your really great partners that they really need your services? You can be a great benefit to their clients, and you can create those strategic relationships. And I think that's really, really smart. And then it can keep you in a place that you don't have this big overhead. You don't have like this big team. You're trying to like figure out how to make payroll next month. You don't have to worry about, huge receivables that aren't coming in. So you cannot, making sure that you can make payroll. So I like that for you. I think that that's like a really smart and also a, kind of a difficult decision. If you've grown a business before, you probably know in the back of your mind, like I could do it again if I wanted to. And, there's probably some pride or accolades or things that might look like shiny objects, but being able to say like, I'm going to do this a different way, I think is really cool and exciting.
I'll tell you a story that since we last talked, I think our last conversation, I haven't even gotten my license back yet.
So. No, because you said I'm not a lawyer. This is, and we should probably say at the beginning, none of this is legal advice, right? But but you are a lawyer now. Again.
So a few months after I got my law license back, I got approached by Evan Osnos at the New Yorker magazine, and they wanted to do a story. And there had been some stories about, about me having got my law license back, but this was the New Yorker. I mean, this is like probably the preeminent nonfiction journalistic publication in the country. I mean, this is, and they wanted to do a story. So they fast tracked it over the summer, and it did come out at the end of August in 2021. And so I can basically break my trajectory down, or my growth down, to pre-New Yorker and post-New Yorker.
Oh, yeah.
The New Yorker, everything just caught fire, both for the support group and for my law firm. So, and there were all kinds of opportunities sprung from that.
Sure.
But then a couple of months after that, I went to my first white collar conference run by the American Bar Association. And I'm telling you, I was scared. One, I was a lawyer again recently, and two, these are like prosecutors and defense lawyers, and for 20 years I wasn't really around lawyers like that, and I was afraid. Like how am I going to present myself? I just didn't know. Everything you can possibly imagine was running through my head. So there was the white collar committee that I had signed up for. So it meets at this predetermined time during the conference, and there's maybe 30 lawyers sitting around in a circle, and the chairman of the meeting says, "Why don't we just first go around and each introduce ourselves real fast, and then we'll get to the agenda." And so each lawyer there was said his name, his or her name, and where they were from. And almost invariably it was like from a large firm. So-and-so from Skadden Arps, so-and-so from Sherman Sterling, so-and-so from there, and then it came around to me, and I didn't know what to say. So I said, "I'm Jeff Grant, and I served 14 months in federal prison for a white collar crime." That's what I said. And with that, the chairperson stood up, pointed his finger at me, and said, "You're the guy from the New Yorker." And that's how I was able to navigate all of these conferences and everything. And just from a business plan perspective, I mean, obviously it wasn't something I intended, but there it is. And so when I introduce myself, or someone gets introduced to me, it's, what a calling card.
Yeah.
And so there it is. I mean, if, to the extent that anybody's kind of paying attention, something that's kind of negative can wind up being something that's very, very positive if it's handled the right way.
Yeah. I mean, what that is it's your differentiating factor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your special sauce, basically, of like what makes you the person that somebody would want to talk to versus other people, somebody who's actually been there and understands. So I think it's good to put that forward, and knowing that it might feel controversial to some people or something, but if it differentiates you, and it also probably gains like that instant, like you said, like street cred right there.
And I'm working now probably 90% of the time online, Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
um, remotely. My office is in Manhattan, but my wife and I recently moved down to Florida. We're in West Palm Beach.
Nice.
In fact, in fact, this is my first day in my new house. That's why. That's why
Sure.
there's nothing in back of me. I mean, what a gift to have figured that out. That I can work remotely, and that and I can just shuttle flight back and forth. But I'm going all over the country, and another unique proposition really is that because of my cred, prosecutors will want to talk to me. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a criminal lawyer who's merely advocating for a client. So that's kind of what they do. They're always, I've been in these meetings, and the assistant U.S. attorney is looking to me kind of as a subject matter expert. They're saying to me like what happened here? And with experience and credibility, I can tell them what happened and why. And having worked with 1,000 people in this situation now, and in one case, for example, not to toot my own horn too much here, but flew into Albuquerque and explained to them what happened, much the same way you would, Hannah, but tell them that the client made a series of wrong decisions, but the money got to the right place. So that's a distinction that's very important, because if the money went to the right place, there's no reason to prosecute anybody. But you have to kind of know to move that up to the top line.
Right.
You have to have that as a clear identifying sentence. Nobody took any money. Nobody lost any money. Let me show you how that happened. I mean, they looked at me like that. We want to know that.
Right.
And they decided, and they did not prosecute.
Yeah. Like the time saving, the money saving, everything just by looking at it from the right perspective is huge. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we have to wrap up. You could talk a lot. And I always enjoy our conversations. So if you've enjoyed this conversation, definitely make sure to check out the other video. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes, and then check out everything else that Jeff has going on. You can go to his website. It's grantlaw.com. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Grantlaw.com. And then you can also check out the white collar support group as well. How do they find the white collar support group?
It's at prisonist.org.
Mm-hmm.
But if you Google white collar support group, we'll come right to the top of the search results for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Fantastic. And we'll put any resources to get in touch with Jeff directly or through his website. And then the support group, we'll put all of that in the show notes so you can check it out. I guess the last question, Jeff, what would be, I guess, your final thought to a small business owner who is just, I guess, growing a small business? Let's keep it on that side. Let's say growing a small business from scratch. What would be your piece of advice to them?
It it's the same advice I think that you and I talked about 2.5 years ago, I think. And that is there's the business and then there's your personal life. And the business has to be run discreetly for the purposes of perpetuating that business. And then it can throw you off a nice income. If you're living above your means, doing it to sacrifice the integrity of the business, and then all kinds of mistakes can get made. So if you live within your means and have patience, all kinds of good things can come.
I love that. I didn't even mean for it to be a financial advice, but I absolutely agree. And I think that's a really wise thing to keep in mind, and it'll keep you out of trouble for sure. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jeff. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hannah. Wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.